This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Yeah. Oh, this is the chapter where the subject of negotiations is talking with the White Tower. Like, that's like where the chapter title comes from. And yeah. So this is when the negotiations open, and those stay open for a very long time, all the way through the reconciliation, basically.
Yeah, I mean, because they're a delaying tactic.
Right. Yeah, because nobody's doing it seriously except for like one or two of the Greys.
Yeah.
Everyone else is doing it ironically.
Bayanin is about the only one who's convinced it's a good idea.
Well, and Bayanin is Elida's plant. So.
Oh, okay. I missed that. I always forget that she's a plant.
Yeah, well, it's because I'm listening forward, and I love her portrayal. I was so shocked when it happened that, like, every time she comes up, and I'm like, you sneaky son of a bitch.
That's right, yeah. Oh, good call. Yeah, okay. That changes a little bit about that section.
This is going to be a fun chapter. But should we start with the cleansing, as we have been lately?
Let's start with the cleansing, yes. Because the one thing about that chapter is it does happen after the cleansing.
Yes,
this whole
by
chunk,
days.
By days, happens a little bit after the cleansing. So we're getting close to the end of the cleansing. We have, 1, 2, 3, 4... Really 4 and the, epilogue, which I think we should just roll into the fourth one, because it's 2 sentences.
No, it needs its own separate section.
Okay, 5. We got 5 sections left, including the one we're doing today.
Oh, God.
Or after the one we do today. So, these 5 sections line up with Egwene in these 5 days afterwards. I know technically we wanted to have the cleansing done to match up with the other book, Crossroads of Twilight, but
the error has accumulated.
They're still talking about the cleansing. Yeah. And the next 5 sections are basically all about how Osengar almost took out the Dragon Reborn.
Yeah, I'm fine with the timeline getting a little bit out of lag at this point, because we've mostly made it through. But yeah, for now, we're going to go to Winter's Heart, section Cadsuane.
Section Cadsuane.
Section Cadsuane. We're rejoining Cadsuane. We've been alluding to this one for quite a bit. We've been talking about what goes down in this particular POV a lot as we've been covering this chapter. So here we are. And this is where Cadsuane is asking Min how things are going. And the sentence that's really important in the opening is, holding that shield through most of a day was enough to tire anyone. So we are most of a day through at this point, and she's asking Min, hey, that statue over there, how does it feel? How's he doing?
Right, because he hasn't moved for the entire day. He's basically been physically motionless, which is a feat in and of itself. But, he's got the endurance of a warder. I do think that is one of the reasons he's able to keep going when Nynaeve here is begging for a release. Yeah,
because she has No, she doesn't even have the Aes Sedai end of the warder bond yet. She just has the attitude of it. Right. Yeah. Nynaeve doesn't have anything of the warder bond. Rand has 2 different warder bonds on him. So yeah, it's okay that he's enduring better than she is at this point. But yeah, he's just sitting there absolutely soaked in sweat, but otherwise unmoving. They say that there hasn't been an attack on the hilltop for some time. Elsa is pacing an endless circle around the hill, but there's nothing for her to do at the moment. Give her a couple of POVs, and she will be frying a Forsaken off the top of a hill. But for now, she's just pacing around looking for something to hit.
Okay, so that timing does work out, right? So I didn't realize she fried Osengar from the hill itself. I thought she was behind him.
No, she's up on one hill and spies across to another hilltop.
Okay. But the hilltop she's on is the same one that Rand is on.
Yes.
Okay. So the timing of this works. So essentially, Cadsuane, she is lowering the shield a little bit because she notices, or at least lowering the strength of the shield, because she notices just how exhausted Nynaeve is. So do we want to read this whole section, or do you just... It's a little long.
It's long. I just want to go through the important highlights.
Okay. So I'm doing it a bit out of order. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. The next thing I've got is checking in with the dome, right? Because the dome has been building up for hours at this point, and it is now immense at a distance of miles. So, it started out that the air sort of gets dark in the city, and then there's like a little lip of black poking up And now there's this just massive, huge dome that is much bigger and taller and more imposing than Eridhall ever was.
Right. 1,000 feet tall, right?
It's huge.
Huge.
That is, and
that's half a mile.
It's so big.
More than half a mile, 3/4 of a mile. Yeah. That. And this thing probably is a sphere, right? So we're imagining if it's half a mile tall, well, it's going to be, that's radius, so it's going to be a mile across, which is taking out a big chunk of the city. Now, the fact that the city's completely gone, actually, I do want to talk about that a little bit, because I don't think the Black Dome gets that big.
Really? Because the hole in the end is described as being 3 miles in diameter.
Okay, so I guess it's still getting bigger even at this point?
I think so. I think it is getting bigger right up until the moment when it winks out of existence.
Okay.
And I imagine that it has a very menacing hum. If you get close enough to it, there's just a sort of like hum in the air that's just like sucks your soul out.
I mean, it's the evils collide, right? This is the Mashadar is being eaten by and fighting the taint of the Dark One.
It's like a stream of like fire and ice like hitting each other and like just hitting in the middle, and there's just like a cloud of steam, and this black dome is the steam that's coming out of that collision.
But what's interesting, though, is like nothing is escaping the dome. There's no eruptions out of it. There's no explosions. The only bubbling is as it gets slightly bigger every time, right? It's not, it's not having mass coronal ejections. It's not having these issues where, evil is spurting out and being flung around, right? This thing is such a black hole that, again, nothing seems to be able to escape it.
Yeah.
And yet it still somehow ends up evaporating at the end. That, I think, is the most interesting part, right? That this black dome isn't just there now, right? There's this cancellation with Shadar Logoth where the two do fight and destroy each other.
Right. Like, what is it that makes the ending of dumping the taint into it that changes the chemical reaction to one of vanishing rather than one of making a big black dome? Yeah, it's very difficult to explain how that just perfectly happened. Yeah.
I almost think it's the context, right? That maybe you have this, what we call the Hawking radiation, right? That you have what's essentially a black hole. And because it's this neutral ball, it ends up giving off some sort of radiation or energy that evaporates. And it evaporates very quickly. Yeah,
I mean, it evaporates so quickly that you end up with a colossal wind dragging everything into the void because it just vanishes in a nanosecond. And yeah, I mean, Mogadine gets like picked up and flung across the surface of the earth because the wind rush is so great.
Okay, so then I guess it's not really radiating out, it's so much sucking in. So now I'm just thinking about star formation, right? You've got to have some outward pressure that's holding it out and open. So maybe that's the Shadar Logoth, and then eventually when you have more darkness than Shadar Logoth, it collapses in on itself. Or maybe when you're done, maybe the pouring of the taint into the ball is what's holding it open. And once Rand shuts off the inward pressure of the taint going in, it collapses in on itself.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's like the dome is sort of representative of like the aperture of the space that he's like passing all this evil to. And then once he's done it closes or something.
Interesting. So now we're talking in 4 dimensions, right? Because this is a 3-dimensional sphere. But if the 3-dimensional sphere is a gateway that he's passing the evil into, maybe he's passing it into a 4-dimensional space, into the Dark One's prison.
I mean, you got to put it back so that way the Dark One has a taint to like put onto the power again at some point when the wheel turns. Right.
Otherwise, the Dark One's going to slowly fade away, right?
Right. I don't know. But
or evil's an infinite resource is another possibility.
Yeah, because I mean, entropy and human nature say that evil will always be around.
Right.
But yeah, we get to Nynaeve, like physically losing her, yoga posture, losing her seated statue posture and like collapsing to the ground, being like, no more, I can't take it, no more. Which like, again, to return to the power as a drug, like Rand is still stuck in that, like you're just staring, watching the trees melt. Like Nynaeve has hit the point where it's like, I just want to see a normal tree. I just want them to stop melting.
No more drugs. No more drugs for that woman.
And then Cadsuane thinks to herself, as we've been referencing this whole time, that like, although Nynaeve can't burn out, she could physically wear out and die. And that would be bad for Nynaeve, but also probably bad for Rand, right? If he was left holding this thing with a dead partner
well,
on the
his
other
flower
end,
would collapse, right?
Yeah,
like his whole, the second half of the structure would be gone.
Right. So Cadsuane lowers the amount of power in her shield just long enough to like make another weave to do one of the like Eye of the World exhaustion wash away weaves. And that we know is enough for Nynaeve to make it through with only the need to sleep for like 30 hours after.
Only, yeah.
I do wonder though if this is near the point when the globe is melting. Because we know that statuette gets damaged and the big statue gets melted, and presumably it doesn't finish being broken until after the event is over, because obviously
that's the order in which the events are told, right? That essentially there's the death of Osengar, then Moghedien sees the ball implode, and then Cadsuane lowers the statue to the ground, all busted up and broken. So if those are told in the right order, the cleansing ends, and the ending is what destroys the statue.
Right. But I'm imagining at this point, there's like those little like hair spider cracks like going across the globe.
Sure.
Right. And like it's starting to glow maybe a little too brightly.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we're reaching critical mass. I don't know. Like all the engineers are like,
right.
You're overdriving it.
Yeah, it's just a matter of time until it's going to explode, right? It's already reached past the point where, like, if it cools off, the thing will shatter, right?
Right, yeah. This is the last time it's getting used at this point.
Right. And the only question is how much longer can you use it before it completely collapses on you?
Right. Cadsuane is able to shore up the human channeler, but she can't do the same thing for the ter'angreal.
So a question we can talk about more when we get to it, but why does the female half statue melt and the male half does not?
I don't know, but I'm mad already.
And it is just the key, right? I think the Choedan Kal themselves are not destroyed.
I can't remember what the exact description is in the scene when we hear about the Amayar's death, but I thought that the globe cracking was part of the description, but I might be wrong about that because I can't recall it right now. It's just that one scene. That's the one time we get it.
Okay. It does look like the Choedan Kal itself melted during the cleansing.
Yeah, because I thought that there was an echo between the little one and the big one because they're like quantum entangled or whatever.
See, now I'm reading that it was they saw the glowing female statue's orb, right? So glowing is the key. Oh, wow, that's rough without reading the actual section.
But can you make another access key? And if not, then the thing's unusable either way because you can't connect to it directly.
I mean, the idea was there were multiple access keys, right? There was never just the one. Now, these are the only ones that have been found, right? They're the ones who the Tinkers... Or sorry, not the Tinkers. The Aiel took away from the breaking and brought to Rhuidean.
Right, and the Forsaken at one point are talking about it, and they say, one of them says, I thought they were all destroyed.
Right.
And it's like, well, no, one pair was left. So if this one broke, does that mean that was the last one?
That's a good question. Could Elaine figure out a way to connect them?
I mean, Elaine might be able to. Okay, Jedi Pants is saying it's just glowing. And the rest of chat is agreeing with that. Per the wiki. All right.
Yeah. That's why the wiki is... Because the wiki also says it was destroyed during the cleansing. The big statue. So that's why I'm like, I think they might be confusing the big statue with the little statue as well.
It would be easy for me to believe that the access key could break, but not have that go with the big... If there were several access keys, right, which we know there were, it would make sense that breaking one wouldn't break the parent figure.
And Zul's pointing out we did see a Saidar key in Tenchiko that was broken.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So, we
did.
have seen other keys busted. We've never seen one that's working, but we've seen busted ones.
Okay. And yeah, I believe that if the male Choedan Kal could stand up to it, then the female one could too. Just maybe the access key wasn't quite up for it. But the big statue should be.
That's what I imagine is the access key just wasn't designed to deal with quite that volume of power and sort of melted. Well, we do tend to repeat ourselves sometimes.
Sometimes.
Okay. Knife of Dreams, chapter 22.
To make an anchor weep.
Right. Almost 3 weeks ago, the MAR on Tremalking began requesting passage to other islands held by the Shanchan. The Great Hand melted, and the MAR took this as a sign that the time of illusions has ended. Yeah.
Yeah, the Great Hand melted. Okay. Yeah, so it did break.
Yes. So as well as the access key is actually mirroring the statue itself. They both melted and broke.
Okay. So presumably the access key melted and broke because the big one melted and broke. Presumably all the access keys left in the world were we're done.
We're done. Yeah. I imagine if you had one that was intact, it would have been melted.
Right. You would have woken up the next day and been like, what the fuck? And that would have been it. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's actually a good point, that maybe the female access key, because it was exposed this whole time, right, the hand was always sticking out, as opposed to the male access key, which was buried and just recently got unearthed. Maybe the female one weathered more. And the only issue with that is power-wrought things just don't weather. Yeah,
I mean, magic stuff is supposed to not weather, but also Poseidon is a powerful force.
Right. Salt water is... Oof.
Yeah. It's brutal stuff.
It's brutal stuff, yeah.
And it wasn't like the tool was being maintained and used all that time. Presumably if you light it up every now and then, the salt scaling gets knocked off just by the radiant glow. But if you don't power it up for 3,000 years, there's going to be some corrosion. Yeah.
A little rusty joints, yeah.
Yeah. Or just ta'veren.
ta'veren. Yeah, he needed it for later for the Dragon Mount thing. So he needed the temptation to overcome it, I guess.
I'm sighing. That's just meh.
Shall we switch to Crossroads?
Yes. Let us switch to Egwene being clever.
I guess the only thing I want to point out is that Cadsuane helping out Nynaeve does lessen the protection, which does give Osengar the opening to attack.
Is that why Osengar attacks?
That's my assumption, is that because she slightly lowers the shield, he attacks. It's not clear from his POV. Or let me rephrase that. That's why his attack is an actual threat.
Okay. I could go with that for the timing. That she notices that one Aes Sedai bending down to the other and is like, this is my moment. And then only Elsa the Dark Friend saves the day.
ta'veren, that's true ta'veren, right? Manipulating the Dark Friend to save the life of the hero.
That's not ta'veren, it's Varen.
Like I said, that's the Varen. ta'veren.
Yeah, ta'veren.
Yeah, ta'veren.
ta'veren, ta'veren. Chapter 16, the subject of negotiations, and our symbol is the bull, the Gareth Bryn bull with the roses around its neck.
Well, just because he's mentioned and they talk about him here, that seems kind of a random-ass subject for this chapter.
Yeah, I mean, the military positionality, because I know why it is. It's because it's the other subject of negotiations in this chapter. In addition to the truce, there's the negotiations around how do we use the power? How do we use gateways in war?
Right.
There's a really big discussion with Bryn as the point of the spear representing the worst of the military-industrial complex. So I think that's why he gets to be the chapter icon.
We use it to kill a lot of people.
But mostly the other guys, which is my job.
Right.
So
let me do my job.
Right.
Right. And she's like, well, I don't want a bunch of people to die. And he's like, yeah.
But you do, though.
That's sort of the only way to win this, don't you know?
Right. But on the other hand, as we know, ultimately, she's able to prevent a lot more deaths from happening because of how long she waits to initiate the attack. It doesn't end up coming to a full-scale assault.
Right. Well, and her kidnapping has a lot to do with that, and the fact that she's able to infiltrate from the inside.
Right.
You know, in a lot of ways, her kidnapping is the perfect solution to the dilemma that she's coming up with here, which is, how do I reunite the towers? How do I influence the people inside the tower? Because I've got everyone outside the tower on a string. How do I get inside and get them reunited? And it's like, oh, I should go get kidnapped, because that's what the girls in this series do.
It works. It worked. But you're right. Literally, it's like, well, I'll pull out the old get kidnapped trick.
Oh, man. How do I solve these problems? I get kidnapped. How do I find the Black Hotja? I let them kidnap me. Right?
How do I get access to my enemies in such a way that I'm actually able to talk to them for weeks on end? Get kidnapped. How do you sneak in? You don't. You get carried in chains. Okay, I'm going to read us in. The morning sun sat on the horizon, leaving the nearer side of Tar Valon still wrapped in shadows, but the snow that covered everything gleamed brightly. The city itself seemed to shine behind its long white walls, all bravely towered and bannered. Yet to Egwene, sitting her roan gelding on the riverbank above the city, it seemed even farther away than it really was. The Aranen widened to more than 2 miles here, and the Alandrellen Aranen and Osendrellen Aranen, flowing to either side of the island, were almost half that, so that Tar Valon appeared to sit in the middle of a great lake, unreachable despite the massive bridges that stood high above the waters so that ships could sail beneath them easily. The White Tower itself, a thick bone-white shaft rising to an impossible height from the city's heart, filled her own heart with a yearning for home. Not for the 2 rivers, but for the tower. That was her home, now. A plume of smoke caught her eye, a faint black line rising from the far bank beyond the city, and she grimaced. Daishar stamped a hoof in the snow, but a pat on the neck sufficed to soothe the roan. It would take more to soothe his rider. Homesickness was the smallest part of it, minuscule compared to the rest. Ah, Jordan. A thick bone-white shaft.
You and I are thinking the same thing.
Why you gotta make me read that? Why?
Oh, rising from the center of the vagina. It's... Which, again, that lines up with the oath rod. Also a bone-white shaft is what it's described as.
White rod.
Right?
Smooth white rod.
I find it really interesting that the tower itself mirrors the oath rod, and how much the oath rod is what makes Aes Sedai, and that you have this visual almost scaling up of the oath rod. And to be the White Tower is the oath rod, just big and white and tall.
The Aes Sedai are the oath rod, are the Aes Sedai are the tower.
Are the oaths.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But also, like, magic woman isn't properly a magic adult woman until phallic symbol.
Right. Clearly the breaking of the innocence of the novices is here. Take this phallic symbol and let it bind you through some sort of ceremony that will shorten your life. It does sound a lot like marriage, doesn't it?
And you get a gold wedding ring.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And you can't ever get out of it. Also, you'll eventually end up with a facelift.
It sounds a lot like marrying rich, right?
I mean, you
get an allowance of a bunch of gold crowns every year.
Yeah, and you get boy toys that you can just go through.
Right. And multiple in your life, right?
No.
But you have to stay married to the tower.
Yeah, and you literally can't break those oaths. Literally,
physically,
you have taken this thing into your spiritual core, so that you literally can't change it.
The other thing, the Arendrell Aranen and the Osendrell Aranen, does that just mean like left river and right river?
Yeah,
in the old tongue. Yeah, because we have Osengar and Arengar.
Yeah, which is the left and right daggers.
And right daggers.
So
and so
Aren and Osen.
Right.
Yeah, it's just left and right. That's all it is. Fun old tongue stuff.
But I love the relationship to our Forsaken, who we were just talking about, is about to get ended in the cleansing.
Yep. And we've got the other one of those Forsakens still being sneaky here in the Aes Sedai camp, because Delana has not yet left, which means that Arengar is still in place.
Arengar and Halima is still here. Yep.
We get mention of the chain that's blocking the harbor. We get a big, long discussion about what the chain does and how it operates for security, just laying the groundwork for what her plan is.
Right, which is stop the chain from being able to be taken down by turning it into Quendiar.
Right. She figures if she can stop the harbors from being secured things, then they can change the siege.
So she's just on like I want to go look at the enemy excursion. It's kind of undercover, right? She's just trying to pretend she's like any other Aes Sedai, just out there to check out look at the White Tower. Yeah.
Just to look at the situation, to be shown the actual situation on the ground by Gareth, not described through maps, not with a hand-waving PowerPoint, but actually to see him pointing at the tower itself and saying, this is what's going to happen here and here.
And so while they're on the river, they see a bunch of ships come into the Tarvalin Harbor, which are full of 200-ish soldiers, right? So Tarvalin is getting reinforcements, supplies. They're able to take the chain down, let the boats in, put the chain back up.
Yep, and they are recruiting, if not as hard, potentially harder and faster than Brynn is able to recruit. So every one of those boats is another load of men that her army is going to have to kill.
Or, alternatively, the Pattern knows she's going to take over the tower, and they're actually reinforcing her troops for the final battle. Because she uses all those troops during the final battle, right? Those all become her troops when she takes over.
Very true. But at this point, Brynn is pointing at them and saying, that is making my job harder.
Yes.
That one is also making my job harder.
Right.
And that's part of what he's showing her. It might not be what she wanted to see, but I think that's what he wants her to see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they don't know at this point it's all going to be made irrelevant by the Seanchan attack on the tower. And it's like, yeah, you don't have to take it down Elida with the Seanchan will do it for you.
Yeah, there's a lot that they don't know is going to happen. The kidnapping and the Seanchan attack are just really hard to factor for at this point.
Right. Until she starts dreaming about it.
Well, but then you'd have to actually listen to her, and she'd have to tell more than just like 3 stuck-up women about it. If she told Brynn about it, he would probably be like, oh, that seems like a reasonable interpretation. I'm going to set up night guards or whatever.
Yeah, and Egwene is certainly Ta'Viren by proxy, as we say. Even if she's not Ta'Viren, Rand needs her to be in that position. And so the Pattern is acting like she's Ta'Viren because things are happening around her to make her the Aes Sedai for Rand in charge. The Amyrlin seat, not the Aes Sedai.
Yeah, I completely agree that, I'd rather that she just is Ta'Viren, but also, like, if Rand is the most important Ta'Viren, everything is pointed at him. All the other Ta'Viren are, all the non-Ta'Viren are. And yeah, like, it totally makes sense that she ends up with Ta'Viren-like outcomes because Rand needs her to. Like, Ta'Viren works at a distance. It's not like a magnetic field. It's very quantum non-Euclidean in its scope. Mm-hmm.
And the only reason why I don't think she is Ta'Viren, the big reason is
Swan.
Swan sees Ta'Viren and would see her the second. She would be like, whoa, you're Ta'Viren right now, and like would point that out.
And it would make more sense even for her to be like, that's the one I want to be Amyrlin, because I can see that she's Ta'Viren and nobody else has that talent. I know that she's the horse to bet on. But we don't have that single line that would tie it all together. So we either have to headcanon around it or just give her the caveat of being almost Ta'Viren or Ta'Viren by proxy.
The only other thing I was able to come up with is that maybe women can only see male Ta'Viren and you need a male Ta'Viren seeing person to see Egwene. But then we've got Logain, who also sees her and also doesn't comment on it. And
Logain comments on Rand.
Yes.
So, yeah. That doesn't do. Even though it is on brand for RJ, even he didn't get quite that binary.
She thinks about how she could take down the boats, but that would be using the power as a weapon. And even though she hasn't technically sworn the 3 oaths, she's trying to live by them.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's very much, she's right. That would be a weapon. Making a whirlpool that someone chooses to jump into is not using the power as a weapon. But like knocking a hole in the boat absolutely is.
I also find it interesting logic. Even one death would make what she did using the power as a weapon. You could use power as a weapon and not kill somebody. if you blow their leg off and then heal them like that, like you're still using it as a weapon, like, or if it, that seems an odd way to make that distinction, is to be like, death is what makes the use of a power weapon. I could sink those ships as long as I could also save everybody. No, that's still using it as a weapon.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I wonder how the oaths interpret weapon, because certainly Egwene is thinking that it means death and nothing less. But what do the oaths actually? How do the oaths manifest?
The oaths don't interpret the person who swears the oath is the one who interprets it. So it depends on what the Aes Sedai is thinking, right?
So if an Aes Sedai is like, it's only a weapon to kill someone, that means that she can beat you within an inch of your life with the power. And
which we see all the time. We see all the time with the punishment. We see people get the shit beat out of them with the power. And it's not a weapon. It's a tool of instruction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's all about what the person who is wielding, which we've seen with the truth, right? You say no word that is not true. Well, if you believe it's true, you can say it, even if it's not true.
Yeah.
Same thing. You can use the power in any way you want. You just have to convince yourself you're not using it as a weapon.
And the flip side of that was when Egwene was Damani, right? And she thought about hitting Rena with the water pitcher, and then she couldn't touch it until she convinced herself it wouldn't ever be a weapon. Like, anything is a weapon.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to sort of, how do you think about the use of the one power? Well, reaching out and picking somebody up with a weave of air isn't a weapon, but you do it around their neck. It's the same weave. One's a weapon.
And same thing with the whole like having to be in danger thing. Like, in danger of what? What if you feel like you have to be in danger of your life versus in danger of like being minorly inconvenienced, in danger of having your leg blown off? Like, where's the line of danger? How much bodily harm do you have to be in danger of before you're allowed? Like, that's got to be interpretation, right?
3 words for you. Stand your ground. And the way the stand your ground laws have become to be interpreted as, are you in danger? Are you allowed? Like, what the difficulty our country has had around defining what is self-defense when you have a gun, all of that applies to Aes Sedai in defense of her own life.
Oh, I guess the oath is more specific. It is in defense of your own life, not in defense of your own limbs.
Or a warder, or,
or another sister.
Or another sister.
Yeah.
So there's a lot.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. What is self-defense? What is self-defense versus what is offense? Because, I mean, sometimes...
And what if a category of person is threatening, like a white cloak? Is it not self-defense to strike out ahead of time?
Yeah. I mean, clearly the Aes Sedai have worked out that that's not true, but like,
What if they're not a white cloak, but what if they're a minority that you're scared of?
Yeah. Well, we do get the big rant from Varen about how like the white cloaks are safe until they actually draw weapons. Right. Like, we know that there are some very like specific ways that the Aes Sedai have taught themselves to interpret that, but it feels like it has to come down to personal interpretations, and it just takes a strong-willed Aes Sedai to realize that, rather than following the dogma, but to actually make up her own opinions, and then the oaths are going to be as bendy as she is. Again, proving that the oaths are a terrible idea, and magic people don't need magic brain bondage in order to be trustworthy members of society. I don't like the oaths. I really don't. I hate the fact that Egwene comes back around on them.
There's a Lycanus trilogy series I've referenced before. There's a scene where there's magic users, and then there's people who are bound, who can't use magic, but are the ones that can order magic users around. And the magic users, but they are bound to protect the magic users, but they hate the magic users. So one of them convinces himself that to protect them, he needs to kill them all.
Yeah. Yeah. See, making people swear magical oaths of any sort, like, unless you're a robot and it's Isaac Asimov's stories, like, it's a bad thing.
Those were pretty bad too, actually. 3.0s didn't go as well. That was the whole point of iRobot, is the three rules of robotics inevitably led to a robot who said, I can only protect people by killing them all.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why I made it. I've read iRobot. It was a long time ago.
But, the point was so eloquently made in the movie. I don't know how
probably the problem, because I've watched the movie once, more recently, but also a long time ago, and wires got crossed. But yeah, it's just like, you can't make promises that work in all situations. It's just never a thing.
So she thinks about weaving basically, firework over it, and is like, well, no, but then they're going to do a firework, and then I'm going to make a bigger firework, and then we're going to actually shoot each other.
Military exercise.
Yeah.
It's a military training exercise.
Let's avoid some escalation. So
yeah.
We get a Choedan name drop. He's the one who's recruiting everybody inside the tower. He actually becomes a pretty staunch ally of Egwene, or like later on when she's captured, right? Like,
yeah, I think Bryne very easily adds him as his second in command, and the forces just come together, and it's no big deal.
Right, because he's a competent military commander. So
yeah, he just got hired to do a job, and he's doing it. Yes, whatever.
Right. But it's weird. These enemies of Egwene actually end up being her allies.
Because most of them are there for the paycheck. I mean, we get a lecture in this chapter about how most people who join these conflicts are doing it for the pay, not for the ideology. And so it makes sense.
Yet, for a simple fact was that for carrying a pike or spear, a man could earn twice each day what he would get for walking behind another man's plow, and half again as much if he could ride well enough to join the cavalry. Crossbowmen and archers fell in between.
For a poor man, staring down the point of a pike could be a better view than the hind end of somebody else's plow horse, even if he was far more likely to die. That's the core of it.
Mm-hmm. There's a certain amount of upward mobility and freedom. If you're a farmer, you're a farmer, you're a farmer. That's all you're ever going to do. It's a life, but it's a hard one. For a soldier, there's a chance of riches, a chance of being promoted, a chance of having enough money to maybe have someone else working for you, working your fields.
And that's why the poor are who fight the wars.
Yes. Yeah. And we still do that today.
It is extremely, extremely, it is poor man's college. That's how my mom, who's from that world, has always described it to me. That's the poor man's way to get to college. If you can survive the military, you can get an education. You can get resources that are not available to you as someone who isn't going to get to college any other way.
And it's funny. Most of the people I work with don't have college degrees, right? I'm working with a group of people who are mostly ex-military guys, at least the older guys, learned how to do what they do by being trained to work on airplanes. And then when we started making computer chips, well, the computer industry said, well, what's also highly technical machine work? Airplanes. Let's recruit the airplane technicians. And where are the best airplane technicians? The Air Force. And so a lot of the old guys I work with are former Air Force guys who never went to college, but got essentially a college equivalency degree in the military by being trained up on these airplanes.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of resources to be had if you're willing to sell your physical and mental health to a nation state. If you're willing to wield violence for the state, you might get some pretty cool feathers for your nest at the end. Or not.
Yeah.
Maybe not. You might get absolutely fucked and live on the street until you die.
And these guys are very, very second. I mean, they're working in a hangar far away from the front lines on the machinery.
Sure.
So for them, it's, very removed from the frontline violence.
Until it isn't.
And I mean, we can talk about the support staff and stuff like that in the military, certainly. Yeah, the military
camp followers in RJ parlance.
Camp followers. So that's what I was going to say. In Robert Jordan's word, they would be camp followers. They would be the people the blacksmiths, the people who are doing the cooking and the prostitutes and the farriers and the cobblers. The camp followers. Yep.
Technical support staff for the military.
Right. And in our world, they are part of the military.
Right. They're not followers. They're integrated from square one. Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting thought. I hadn't really thought about that. I really think of them as camp followers, not camp support. But like the army would fall apart if they didn't have the followers.
Right.
So clearly, yeah, they have a actual real world military equivalent, and it's called like all the things that aren't being violent in the military.
And it's amazing how much of Robert Jordan's world that camp follower isn't actively being managed by the military. It somehow has, it springs up through capitalism on its own, but you'd think that a good military commander would organize. And I feel like Matt does through supplies and supply dumps and quartermasters and that sort of thing.
Lots of people use quartermasters. That's not an innovation that Matt has.
No. But I feel like he manages his supply lines better than like even Gareth Bryn is here.
How? Matt never engages with his camp followers. They just follow. Like, Matt's better, quote unquote, but we never see him using the camp followers to any great effect.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
I wish he did. I mean, you're super right. Like, I mean, even when Gawain rides up and thinks about how well organized Bryn's camp is, it's like, and why does he not extend that to the critical support staff outside the camp wall? Because I think the answer is because Jordan, as a good American, believes that capitalism is everyone's natural state, and in a vacuum, like self-organized, self-interest based capitalism will just flow naturally like the sun and the rain.
I was thinking, I guess, more of how the band is mobile and doesn't even have camp followers, really, because it moves so fast.
Do they not have camp followers? They might not.
That's what I'm trying to figure out is like, he talks about moving quickly and how that's
they're
super important to him.
They're able to be without them.
Right. And so he must, I was thinking he must manage the camp followers because how else would they be that mobile? But maybe they just don't have.
They're just self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And are able to do all their stuff. They are actually the more integrated military, like what we would recognize.
Right.
Where everyone is a member of the unit.
And they all have skills and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right, because you have people like Vannon, right, who really don't do a lot of fighting, but he's like the best farrier and like knows all the horsey medicine and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe Matt's just understanding that camp followers is a useless category. You just support staff in the fucking unit. And
Right.
No, okay, I'm back around. You're right. Matt uses them more efficiently by recategorizing them entirely out of existence. And not taking a lot of them, right? He doesn't have the washerwomen and the prostitutes. Like, he's only got the critical, like, technical staff that help keep the guns running.
And again, we have to give Talmanis a lot of credit for that because when Matt shows up and finds the band, he's like, my God, you were a tenth of the size. You've literally grown 10 times the size since I last saw you. And that Talmanis has been in charge of that the whole time.
Because Talmanis is a good work spouse.
Yeah, definitely.
Talmanis is Matt's work spouse, and he did a great job while Matt was out of the office.
Yeah, I feel like he's like the absentee CEO who comes back and there's like the CTO is like, yeah, so we're now. Oh, what am I thinking of? I'm thinking of Dr. Evil when he goes up in space in the beginning in that first Austin Powers movie. And he comes back. Yeah, don't shake your head at me. I know you haven't seen it. I'm talking to everybody else who enjoys modern media like the rest of me. And he comes back down, and he does that whole thing where he's like, "I want to demand $1 million," and number two's like, "So we're actually a multi-billion-dollar company. We bring in legal revenues of several thousand times the money you're demanding in ransom on a yearly basis through legitimate business practices." And Dr. Evil's like, what? Oh, okay. He's number two was the Talmanis to Dr. Evil's Matt, right? Like, gotcha. He went away for a while, came back, and suddenly he's in charge of this much bigger corporation that's like doing a whole bunch of stuff. He's like, oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Now I've got power.
So ironic. I mean, not ironic, but it's so funny because that's how he acquired Talmanis. Was trying to run away from stuff. And then he leaves the army with Talmanis, and what does Talmanis do? Grow it into an army that's even harder to get rid of.
But at that point, Matt's like, okay, so I just married an empress. I need my own personal army.
Yeah, it does turn out that he needs one. He mostly stops bitching about having one after that, too.
Until Sanderson takes back over again.
It's so frustrating because I fucking love Hinderstap. I just hate Matt in Hinderstap. But I love the Hinderstap arc, and I love all the other characters. It's just what is this anachronistic Matt in the middle of this epic mini story? I'm right in the middle of listening to that right now. And it's just like,
yeah.
God, this is such a hot and cold mix of excellent and terrible.
Right? Right. That's always my thing with the last 3 books, is so much of it is so good, but there's just chunks of it that make me go, ooh. Like,
yeah,
that's no good.
But what is good is what is
You really tried to transition there so hard, and you just didn't have a goal. Nope. So what is good is that Gareth Bryn is pointing out to Egwene that in order to take the city, she needs to take action, and delaying is just going to lead to more deaths.
Yes. And the real crux of that push that he's making, fine, I won't edit it out. So the real crux of that push he's making is, let me have gateways.
Yes.
That's the crux of this. He's been like, they've been in a siege, right? They've been in a stalemate this whole time. And now he's realizing that he's known gateways were a thing, but now they've been here for a while, and he's seeing the numbers coming in, and he's renewing the argument that has happened before, but he's renewing it that, like, let me have gateways. If I have gateways, I can take the tower with a very minimal loss of life.
And I feel like Egwene's basically saying, I don't want to use gateways because I'm afraid that someone in the tower will see how they're made and then we'll lose the advantage, which is like, okay, well, it's not an advantage if you never use it. Number 2, I really do think she's procrastinating because she doesn't want to kill anybody. She's trying to figure out a way to get through this without anybody dying.
And we know it takes her literally the most possible time to get this sorted out. Like, she is seconds away from giving the order to launch the assault when they actually come out and wave the white flag. Right. So her reluctance here is like absolutely plot critical, but it's hard to see it as anything other than her just dragging her feet and making the butcher's bill go higher.
Right.
Like, you really want to shake her and be like, Egwene, the military general is telling you. You're... Sunbeam dog.
Timber's chilling in the sun.
Getting warm in the sun. The sunbeam just like right on his paws and his face.
He's glowing a little bit.
Yeah, he's definitely like, radiant dog.
Yeah, you hear him in the background a little bit. Yes. I'll shift over here so you can keep an eye on Timber while we keep podcasting.
Puppy cam. But yeah, basically what Egwene says is too many people had begun seeing the use of gateways, and in a way, Gareth represented the worst because his business was war, and he was very good at it. This is the military-industrial complex taking a perfectly excellent tool and turning it into like nothing but a weapon of death, right? That's what this conversation is the military-industrial complex taints everything it touches.
And this is an incredible weapon. I mean, Matt sees it right away. Rand has been using it for a while now. It makes walls relevant. Yeah.
More so than cannons, which are about to make walls much less relevant than they were.
More than channeling, which also kind of made walls irrelevant, right? Like, walls haven't made a lot of sense for a while now.
Well, I mean, Tar Valon has existed for long, as long as channeling has existed. Like, taking Tar Valon, the city where magic users are, is a little special. But, and the dog left.
he too many eyes on him.
Yeah, he can feel it through the camera.
He can.
Why are dogs like that? They are so sensitive to cameras. But yeah, it's the power has always been of limited utility because it had to be used basically as a cannon, right, to destroy walls. But now with gateways, you can just skip the wall entirely. Like, what limited utility walls had, and that the oaths were the main protection against, like, a gateway is not a weapon. It's real easy to just skip the wall, skip taking the wall, all that.
Well, and they've already used it in the other way that's strategic, which is moving distance, covering distance, right? That's something that they've been like, okay, we will cover distance with gateways and approach. But the fact that they didn't gateway right into Tar Valon and instead gatewayed outside the gates of Tar Valon always was sort of weird to me.
Because of this stubborn insistence on not having a hand-to-hand combat on the tower grounds.
Yeah, but I completely agree with Gareth Brent, right? Like, it would be a matter of nothing to Gateway inside. Shield the Lyda, take a few strategic points and declare yourself, hey, we now have the White Tower.
Yeah, it's...
Because they're clearly not ready for an assault. We saw that when the Seanchan show up.
Right. Gareth Bryn is actually having flexible thought in the face of new technology, whereas Egwene is representing exactly how hidebound this fucking ivory tower is. And, she points out here, too, the Ashaman have already been very effective in utilizing gateways for military purposes. You're gonna need to develop this. You can't just hold your nose and take the moral high ground. This is a tool everyone's developing. And then she has the arrogant thought that I really question. If the White Tower dies, hope dies. I'm like, but will it, though? Because the White Tower mostly gives people headaches and fear. Who is the hope? Who is hoping that the White Tower is going to save you? that is a delusion that the Aes Sedai have. But does anyone outside of their echo chamber agree?
It's the CEOs at every big company thinking they're going to save the world with their company.
Yeah, exactly. It's my technology is going to disrupt the industry and free everyone from the everything, and the whole world will be happy dandy for $9.99 a month.
But we've talked about the ineffectiveness of the various Ajahs and the White Tower in general. And yeah, they're placed at a very important spot in the last battle, but they're definitely not they're an important force in the last battle, but they're not the most important force in the last battle.
No one looks to them for leadership. No one looks to them for hope. No one looks to them for inspiration. No one looks to them for healing or negotiation or even being good at dealing with male channelers. No one looks to them for shit except how are the Aes Sedai going to fuck me over this time? Mm-hmm. That's all the White Tower is, Egwene. Let the thing fall. You're wasting your time.
But she's read The Secret History, and they claim that they prevented lots of wars and done all sorts of good things from their point of view.
Again, your echo chamber in your ivory tower has blinded you to the reality of the real world. Go outside and touch some fucking grass. God. I love Egwene's arc when she's captured, but this part of her, she's just so self-righteous, trying to holier than thou her way through women that are centuries too old to be acting like brats. And I just... Listen to Gareth. Gareth's the one who's actually living in the real world.
Okay, the next chunk I didn't fully grok. The spit about cavalry and pinpricks came every night, sometimes one or two or three. And then the residuals of weaving made it plain that they were being aided by Aes Sedai. Who are these people and who are they being aided by and what are they trying to do? I don't understand from her perspective what she's talking about.
Gawain Trakand.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Gawain's raiding parties where Bryn is like, I thought I had a leak in my ranks because the person attacking me knew my patterns and It's Gawain. It's Gawain. Yeah. It's that chuckle fuck.
Thanks. Yeah, I totally missed that. I was like, for some reason, I try not to think about Gawain.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah. So, okay, that makes sense. Few things. And then few things could please Elida more than getting her hands on Egwene Alvier.
True.
Which she does. True. At the end of this book.
But to her regret.
Right.
Elida ends up wishing she hadn't, I think, in the end.
Probably. I mean, or maybe she wished she'd listened to her about the raid that was coming, right?
The amount of times that Elida wishes that she could go back and listen to Egwene Alvier in the next 6 months, the first 6 months of the Fourth Age, she's like, Egwene Alvier, I should have listened to you. She thinks that all the time while she goes back to sleep from her nightmares while she's a good Damani.
Good Damani.
Yeah. And also, Egwene thinks here, too, how long ago since she first came to Tarvalin? It's been an age. It's been forever. I'm like, it's been a year, right?
We're coming up on 2 at this point, right? Because Winter's Night was the middle of winter. And we went all the way back around to Winter's Night was sort of like the beginning of spring, right? The end, isn't that?
Yeah, because Beltane is the maypole. That's where we start.
It's Beltane, it's the maypole and all that kind of stuff. So, spring. And we've had a whole winter where we've had a year. And then that gave us Winter's Heart. And I guess we're a little over a year at this point.
The whole series takes how long? 3 years?
2.5. I feel like it's 2 years to the beginning of the last battle, and then...
Yeah. So yeah, it's like
however long.
We're talking 1 to 2 years, and she's like, I barely remember the woman I used to be. I'm so different now. And it's like, yes, going to college does change a person, but also, like, you are not actually like 80 years wise just because you've been through a lot. And I don't know. It's like she's reflecting on all the time that we've passed as readers at this point. Mm-hmm. Like, she's aged as much as we have since the first book was published, but like in world, no.
This is a little bit of a meta comment is what I'm trying to say. Is this feels like Robert Jordan being like, remember all those years ago when I was writing those like books and starting out, and I created these characters and they were innocent and all that kind of stuff, and now it's like, yeah, these are different characters. It's even hard to relate to those characters, even though for them it's only been a year. There's a couple of things in here where I'm like, it really does feel like this series took a course over about a 10-year period of time, not a 1 to 2 year period of time. Like, I almost feel like it would make more sense if the events had been more spread out.
Yeah,
and like
Rand had spent like a year in each of his kingdoms.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Doing stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is Jordan's meta, because I mean, I am a very different person from the first time that Egwene pulled up to Tar Valon. Like, I have changed a lot. Yeah.
I'm trying to look for a Wheel of Time timeline.
And TC Traveler, you're right. Like, she has gone through all of her different phases between now and then. She's been a Damani and an Aiel apprentice and an Amerlin seat. She has gone through a lot. And like, going away to college and doing field camp, it does change you. But
it's like, she's been to 5 different colleges in under a year. Right? Like, it would be one thing if she spent a year at each college or a year at each different, university learning. But it's like, dude, she's had, 6 weeks at each one of these institutions. Yeah.
The one of them, she was locked in a box and abused by her professor the whole time. So,
she learned quickly.
Yeah. She learned quickly. But yeah, I think you're right. Maybe it's more of a Jordan telling us that he understands it's been a long time since the first book, second book.
I'm looking for that. There was that graph paper that someone sketched all the various amounts of time.
Yeah.
And I cannot find. I had it on my desktop up until like a week or two ago, and I was like, I'll never need this again. Delete.
Until the podcast is over, you will need that.
I know. I don't know why I keep, because yeah. But I think I moved it into a folder. I was like, oh, I can put this away for now.
So the next thing I've got is Egwene thinking about her Council of Six and how her relationship with them has changed and how it has not changed.
One thing I do want to bring up before then is she mentions Myrelle's 3 warders, right? Myrelle.
Yeah, the 3 she dares acknowledge.
Which we know the 4th is Lan.
Yeah.
Interesting that she doesn't mention that Lan is where the cleansing is, the big power surge is taking place. I think that would be interesting information for her to bring up.
But who would she tell? I guess Egwene. That is an interesting point, that Myrelle knows that one of her warders is at the site of the cleansing and doesn't mention it to anybody.
I mean, it can't be a coincidence that they're in the exact same direction, even if she doesn't know how far it is, right? But she knows about how far her warder is, give or take, right? She might not know exactly where he is, but she knows where the last battle's, where the cleansing is taking place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting oversight that she never says anything. But yeah, Myrelle and the other 5 Aes Sedai with her are Egwene's council that she's been listening to forever, for a long time. They've all sworn oaths to her in various ways, but she now has the ability to talk to them in public because she's, quote unquote, accepted a council of advisors from the hall and just told her actual, like, sworn fealty advisors, like, make sure that you're the candidate. And
remember, these were the 6 who Shiriam brought together, right, as a dark friend to reunite the rebels, to make sure that they didn't unite with the tower, to make sure that the split stayed there because she's a dark friend. And they also sent in the ferrets. And in the sending in the ferrets, when Egwene found out about that, she's holding that over their heads to get them to swear fealty to her, because otherwise she'd reveal the ferrets to the hall and they would be in trouble and lose all their authority. So that's how she got these 6 to swear fealty to her, is basically blackmail.
Right. And this is the Saladar 6. When we talk about the Saladar 6, here they are, still in their little 6-pack. So yeah, Delana comes over and asks for a private word. And then we get lots of big, obvious clues about about the fact that Delana's a dark friend, because she's always a supporter of Egwene's, but her support is almost worse than not having support because it's very chaotic. She will pick diametrically opposed stances to have and be ideologically inconsistent because her orders are to make chaos. Just like Shiriam, her orders are to gum up the works.
Also, have you ever had that friend where you're making an argument and they chime in and you're like, you're really not helping, man. Like, the way you're arguing for this is actually counterproductive because your argument is dumb.
Yes.
And you're making me sound dumb by association.
I have a good handful of friends like that. Yes.
Yeah. I feel like that's something that we can relate to. Where you're like, you're not getting the point, and you're making my point sound worse because you're arguing for something that's either faulty or been dismissed or has bad evidence or is, because you're an asshole, right? I've had that too. It's like, well, I'm trying to think of something that I support that's easy to argue.
Pick a hot button issue. We know a friend who's done that.
Right.
Like it's, I mean, all the way up through all of our national discourse. Isn't that the thing, right? You end up having to side with people that are making terrible arguments. It's like, please shut up and let someone more eloquent make this argument. Someone more qualified. You're not helping.
So the example that's coming to mind is if you're like, oh yeah, I'm pro-choice, and the guy's like, yeah, I'm pro-choice too. We need to kill all those babies because we don't want to lower the world population. And you're like,
oh gosh,
no, okay,
yeah,
it's the right side for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, totally.
The fuck them babies party.
It's a very normal pattern to have these things, but Delana is doing it as an art form specifically to fuck things up, not because she's dumb, but because she's smart. I don't know how effective she's being, but it seems in this section like she's being pretty effective at keeping the hall more chaotic than it needs to be. Yeah, here's the line. They wanted to pull Elida down, yet left to themselves, the hall would have done nothing but argue. Truth to tell, though, Delana's support was not always welcome. Like, her and Shiriam are both desperately trying to keep the rebellion as fractured as possible.
You know, what I love about Egwene and her dealing with the politics is she always gets them to vote on something that they think is hurting her, but actually because of changing circumstances is helping her.
Because she's 2 steps ahead and they're reacting to something she did 2 steps ago.
Right. Right. And here in particular, right, this appointing a council to her, she's like, oh, yeah, I actually would like to meet these people in public. They've been advising me in secret. So I'm just going to have you vote to appoint me a council. I'm going to make sure the council is the people I want them to be. And so it's like, oh, you got that over on me. Now I have to listen to these people. Okay, guys, what were you saying?
Yeah. It's brilliant. I love that part about her arc because it seems to be really coming from her and a bit from Swan. It's not like a normal Aes Sedai thing. Like, that's a very unique to Egwene thing. We get a fun little line where he talks about Dragon Mount being all, Egwene looks at, there's some smoke coming off of Dragon Mount, and she thinks about how big and tall it is and how no one can climb up it and everyone dies who tries. And why would anybody try? And, to quote all the mountain climbers, because it's there. That is why people climb mountains. It's because it's there. There's no reason to climb mountains except that they're there, and that is sufficient. Or to throw the ring in the lava. That is also a good reason to climb the mountain.
Or a dream spike in this case.
Or a dream spike. Yeah.
Baron definitely uses that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we see Rand, when Rand's up on the mountaintop, he has to use weaves to keep himself alive, to provide, he's got to compress the air to make sure he's got enough air to breathe. He's got to warm himself so he doesn't freeze to death, right? Like, the fact that he can do that without carrying hundreds of pounds of gear is actually kind of nice.
Right. And he gateways to the top rather than actually climbing, which, like, I have a bit of an obsession with Mount Everest. Ever since I read Into Thin Air, I've been kind of obsessed with, like, Krakauer writing, mountaineering stories. Like, I've read a lot of them, but Everest is my special obsession. And I saw a really cool video the other day of someone who flew a drone off the top. They actually carried a drone up to the summit and then flew the drone from there. And that perspective on seeing that final approach, you know, from Hillary's step on upward, being able to see it from the drone's eye perspective, not Google Earth, not a camera on the ground, but that drone's eye perspective. It's just, I mean, I imagine Dragon Mount's kind of more impressive because it has a lava lake, but Everest and Dragon Mount, like, I can't help but draw the parallel.
Well, and one of the things they bring up is how impressive Dragon Mount is because of the relatively flat country around Tarvalon. Its white-capped crests seem to reach the heavens, right? So you've got this flatter than normal ground. It's essentially Everest, not just in the middle of the Himalayas, Everest in the middle of Kansas.
Right. Very much so.
Which is just a whole different perspective because, and that's one of the things, Everest, how do you measure how tall a mountain is? The furthest from the center of the earth, the tallest from its base to its peak, right? The furthest above sea level, because those are three different ways to measure tallness, and all three of them give you different tallest mountains in the world.
Yeah, only one of those is Everest.
Yeah.
Biggest actual mountain in the world is in freaking Hawaii because most of it's in the ocean.
Right. So if you wanted to talk about above sea level, right, which I think is what Everest is, right? It's the tallest above sea level.
Yeah, Everest is the tallest point on the earth you can walk to. You can't get any higher than that above the surface of the earth.
But then we can talk about how the earth isn't exactly round.
It is such a lumpy potato. Aside from being an oblate spheroid, it's also a very lumpy potato.
So if you talk about furthest from the center of the earth, Everest doesn't have that one either because of the lumpiness of the planet. There's actually, because the planet bulges at the equator, you actually get further from the center of the planet by going up to one of the mountains on the equator as opposed to Everest, which is not.
So I'm guessing like Kilimanjaro or something?
I wish I could remember. I watched it in a YouTube video.
Yeah, I should know. I'm the geologist here, but
I was hoping you would.
But no, you're right. And then, there's just a sheer mass. Because Everest, right, is a peak in a giant belt of mountains. Right. Whereas something like it's Mauna Loa, or is it Mauna Kea? The Hawaiian Islands, they're all hot spots. It's not a mountain range. It's a series of earth pimples.
Right.
Yeah. And a question in chat, which is the hardest for humans to climb? That's going to be the farthest above sea level, because that's going to dictate how much available oxygen is there for you to breathe as you climb.
I would also think, though, the one that's the tallest from base to tip, right? Because if you're already most of the way up from the mountain range, right, in Everest.
That's true. Getting to base camp is in and of itself actually quite the feat. One of my bucket list items is to, quote unquote, go to Everest. The highest I will ever go is base camp. Like, that sounds so incredibly epic, so incredibly beyond my physical capacities. Like, I would never even aspire to go higher than base camp. So yeah, you're right. When people say they climbed Everest, that starts at base camp, which is like a mission to get to.
Right. So Jeddah Pants posted, because of the equatorial budge, the summit of Mount Chimborazo in the Andes is the point on the Earth that is farthest from the center at 2,168 meters farther from the Earth's center than the summit of Everest.
2,000 meters farther than Everest.
From the center of the Earth.
That's not an insignificant number of meters. That's not like a 3 inches or some bullshit. No. Like, yeah, oblate spheroid for the win. But both mountain ranges are caused by the same thing. Well, kinda. Collision.
Right.
The Andes are created by subduction, whereas the Himalaya are caused by continent-continent collision. But in both cases, it is the same kind of forces smashing into each other to make up.
As opposed to Dragon Mount, which is much closer to a pimple in the Earth's surface, as you were describing the Hawaiian Islands, right? Because there was essentially a weak point created by the, I was going to say Balefire-like. It's not fucking Balefire in the prologue, okay?
Yeah, it's not.
Fight me on it. It's not.
It's a laser beam, a super duper laser beam.
A super duper laser beam. Although Balefire would kind of work. Anyway, but by puncturing the Earth's crust, he's creating that magma upwelling that you see in undersea volcanoes, or volcanoes in general, as opposed to just mountain uplift.
Yeah, exactly. Because the other thing is, with the Andes and with the Himalaya, neither of those have volcanoes. Because of the the Andes have some volcanoes in some places, but the Himalaya don't at all. There's no volcanoes in the Himalaya. Whereas, like here in the Pacific Northwest and in parts of the Andes, because ocean subduction, you have, the earth pimples, the Mount Fujis of the world to hop around to the other side of the Ring of Fire. And yeah, that's a much more like straight shot. And then there's Iceland and Hawaii, where it's like a deep, deep conduit of magma that's bringing up stuff. But yeah, what Lews Therin does is basically make a borehole, I'm imagining, maybe 6 feet around, that goes down like a couple of miles, and then the magma just comes absolutely erupting out of that. And then it's like you've uncorked a wine bottle, right? And it's going to keep continuing and make a more traditional cone-shaped stratovolcano. But yeah, without any wrinkling of uplift, without any kind of like foothills, just like space laser, make boom. Very geologically anomalous.
You know what it kind of reminds me of is, have you seen the video where they drill into a salt mine by accident from a lake, and the lake then starts draining into the salt mine, dissolving the salt, creating a bigger hole, creating more of a drain, and the whole thing just dumps into an underground salt mine in almost it feels almost instantaneous. And that's sort of the lava in reverse, right? Because you puncture the hole and then the lava comes up and melts a bigger hole. And then you're going to get more and more pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've seen a video of something like that. I mean, I've seen lakes draining away in some pretty wild videos from the South, because limestone is terrifying and nobody should live in a limestone environment. Please, everyone stop living on limestone. It bothers me.
It's not going to happen.
I know.
So I was referring to the lake, Peigneur, Peigneur drilling disaster.
I'm going to blame the French for that. You pronounce it Smith. It's a specific drilling disaster. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I wonder if my mom knows about this.
In 1980, November 20th, the crew of an oil rig was probing the lake bed when they ran into a small problem. Their 14-inch drill had become stuck at a depth about 12,000 feet. When they attempted to free the drill, they heard a series of large popping sounds from below the rig. Shortly after abandoning the rig, the men watched in amazement as the 10-foot deep lake swallowed the entire oil rig, and in its place, a maelstrom started to form. The miners had accidentally penetrated in the main shaft of the mine below, and the lake was draining into it. And, yeah.
Wow.
There's some incredible photos and videos.
So, yeah, it's like that, but in reverse with lava for Dragon Mount.
Mm-hmm. Right. And instead of gravity pulling the water down, it's pressure pushing the lava up.
Right. Because magma is very, very pressurized. There's very much pressure down there, a mile or 3 into the crust. Okay, and the next thing that I've got is they're in a town right at the edge of Tar Valon. And they're walking through and they're like, wow, we're so strange and mysterious. And even this near the city, sisters had been an uncommon sight till recently. Slightly farther on, the farms that fed Tar Valon covered most of the land. So you are telling me that for thousands of years, these farms have been supporting the tower, and yet not seeing the sisters, not getting visits, not sending their children in, not getting healed, not getting educated, not getting any of the economic benefits of having the fucking Vatican on a fucking island with a special moat right there. Like, the Aes Sedai are such institutional assholes.
Yes.
They're such institutional assholes. They are so annoying. Choedan Kal is asking if I'm really surprised, and I guess I'm not. But I'd never noticed that like the farms that feed Tar Valon are unused to seeing Aes Sedai. Like, you're so disconnected from the land. Women, go outside and touch some fucking grass. Meet a peasant. Like, ugh. I would be such a bad Aes Sedai / good person. You know, this is why Nynaeve is the best. Is because she's like, if you want me to divorce myself from my humanity in order to get the shawl, I don't want your shawl. It's not worth it. Like, why can't more Aes Sedai think like that?
The frustration with the Aes Sedai is like universal. Man, it's terrible. There's just one more example of how the Black Aja and the arrogance and the Ivory Tower and the isolation has come to affect everything about the White Tower.
These farms should have the most productive crops, the longest lived parents, the most hale children. They should be proud to be Aes Sedai adjacent. They should be swelling the ranks of armies when there are wars. Instead, they're just more nasty, dirty people that the Aes Sedai have to kick out of their way on their way to the office. Like, just, ugh.
Small follow-up to our previous timeline discussion, because the chat is amazing and has continually posted all the things that I can't find. They did post the timeline. We are looking at almost exactly 2 years to the end of Knife of Dreams from the beginning of Eye of the World.
Wow.
After that, it gets a little more uncertain. There's like another 3 or 4 months before the last battle's over, depending on how exactly where you are and how you want to categorize that. But end of Knife of Dreams is almost exactly 2 years away. Or from the beginning, and we are maybe about another month and a half from the last battle. So we're 34 months into a 36-month journey before the last battle starts.
Wow.
I forget how that question came up exactly.
Because Egwene was saying that it felt like it had been forever since she'd first come to the tower, and I was like, girl, it's been a year.
Yeah, but so we're looking probably more like a year and 8 months, not maybe a year and 10 months.
Okay, but I still think it's an exaggerated response from her.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and now chat is off on the topic of natural disasters that are not actually natural. They're human-made. And there's the Lake Karache lake disaster, where a lake used to store hot radioactive material that eventually dried out because fucking climate change, and then nuclear waste is falling in dust storms. But that's in Russia, so it won't affect us because that's how borders work.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're never affected by anything that happens in Russia.
No, it's a good thing that the world is so big and flat, not at all round and small.
I can only imagine, like, what's at the bottom of the ocean. Bad shit.
I mean, it depends on if you're the hunter or the prey. Because it's pretty cool. I mean, I love deep sea exploration stuff.
Oh, I guess I more mean like if it dried out and all the shit that we dumped there was exposed.
Yeah. Well, if the oceans dried out, we'd have bigger problems.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. the dying, the everything being dead, I think would be
yes.
a
And the
problem.
oceans will dry out someday in a few billion years.
Right. Yeah, I think it's funny the number of ways people are like, the sun's going to explode. I'm like, we'll be dead long before that happens.
And I mean, explode is such a narrow way to define a star's death.
Are we going to get a supernova out of the sun? Yeah, we just get a white dwarf, right?
Red dwarf.
Red dwarf?
I think. Are we going to go white dwarf? We might be going white dwarf. We're like just below the supernova threshold. So
right.
That is a white dwarf.
Because I think you have to have like 3 to 5 solar masses to go supernova.
Right.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. But yeah, we're going to be on to a whole different solar system by then.
Yeah.
And to not human anymore. Get a really weird line about Gareth as a warder. Greens often choose a more experienced man for their first. Talking about like Egwene potentially bonding Gareth. Like, it's not meant sexually, but like with it being the fuck Aja, like we as the audience are a more experienced older man for their first. Really, Jordan? Is that's the phrasing we're going with? Even though you are explicitly telling us it's not sexual, you really chose that sequence of words. It's just the green Aja, like older, more experienced men for their first.
I'm just saying, young men suck. I was one once.
But it's not at all sexual. It's just it's a mentor-mentee thing. And
are you kidding? In the same way that Lan had a mentor-mentee thing with his little oh god, what was the girl who banged him?
That
abusively?
is explicitly sexual.
Yeah, but this is the same thing in reverse, right?
Well, except that they're not. No one is implying that Gareth and Egwene are going to have a sexual relationship.
But I think that's what Delana is. So Delana's trying to piss her off. So she is implying that it's sexual.
You think so?
Absolutely. She's like, oh, yeah, you want to, because she knows that Gareth, I think she's like basically poking at Egwene, being like, because she, I think, sees the relationship between Gareth and Swan, maybe.
Oh, she does. She says, I wonder if Swan will be relieved if you bond him or upset.
Right.
Oh my God, you really think that she's insinuating that much nonsense? Just, it is Delana.
Because she's trying to piss Egwene off right now. Like the number of times that Egwene has to take her anger and be like, I'm not getting angry at Delana right now. Delana is doing everything she can to create strife and anger and get Egwene's back up before she goes deals with these other Aes Sedai.
I think you're right. Because I, of course, was trying to stick with the in-world stuff. But no, you're right. Delana's absolutely reaching for every implication because she's trying to get under Egwene's skin. That makes sense.
And basically implying like, oh, so you wanna bang Gareth Bryn? She's like, no, she's dating my best friend, my advisor. So you totally want him then, don't you?
Oh, yeah, you're totally right. That's what she's doing. Oh, gross. Delana. I mean,
black.
Yeah, I know. But she's gone from being like an Aes Sedai who I don't really mind, who happens to be black, to now I want to punch her. Now I have a personal, I want to punch you in the face. Not just for being Black Aja, but
And she knows a lot of what's going on in Egwene's private life because she's getting it from Halima.
Yeah. Yeah, she totally has way more perspective on Egwene than Egwene realizes she has. Yeah. Okay, well, that's fun.
Same thing with demanding the Hall make a formal declaration that Elaida was black. She's just trying to stir the pot, make sure everybody's angry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then we get a fun line for irony for Gawain. Gawain was either inside Tar Valon or else on his way to Caemlyn. We wish, Egwene. We wish. And the next thing Delana does is sow mistrust amongst at Egwene for all of the other Aes Sedai, all of her advisors, just stirring the pot.
Here's a line. Spring would be coming soon, and the plowing and planting and what Aes Sedai did would not affect that. The light willing, it would not. I mean, it kind of will because of the whole weather pattern, Dark One stuff. But that also gives us a time. Spring is coming soon, and that's the second spring since Winter's Night. So that gives us our... spring is soon, 2 years after they left the Two Rivers.
We're coming up on our 2-year anniversary of having left the Two Rivers. Yeah, okay. And then Delana brings up the subject of negotiations with Elaida because we're stirring the pot, and it's just a distraction. Egwene engages with it in good faith, but nobody else is, really. Everyone still thinks that Egwene isn't actually in control of her own shit.
It's Suan, but then she's too resentful, which again is her just being good acting, but also kind of being resentful. And then so now they think it's Shiriam who's doing the puppeting. So that's why she's sort of out of favor.
Right. And Egwene's like, oh my God, why won't anyone acknowledge me as my own genius?
Right.
And it's because you're doing a really good job of dissembling and making it look like other people are doing it for you. So and then we get a big long discussion about the concept of negotiations, basically.
So here's what I don't get about, here's a question. You may be sure that any advice one of them gives you comes straight from the head of her Aja. And as you know, the head of an Aja and its sitters don't always see eye to eye. I don't understand what she's doing there. She's basically saying your council is advising you based on what the head of the Aja thinks, which is different than the Hall.
Yeah, I think that's what she's saying, is that the advice you're being given is putting you in opposition with the Hall. And so, you should try to do what the Hall wants.
And so you should not listen to it? Okay.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. You should be ignoring your advisors and following the popularity contest in the Hall instead. That will make you more effective, Mother.
And I think, and here's the line. Anger made for hasty decisions and rash words that sometimes were hard to take back. Did Delana think she was a fool, or perhaps the woman was trying to make her angry? I think that's where she sees the truth. Delana is trying to make her angry, trying to make her do something foolish with either her council or the hall.
Yeah. Yeah.
And don't forget her counsel, right? Again, Shiriam is the dark friend. There's this whole... Well, Shiriam's also a dark friend who wants to be involved. And I feel like Shiriam is being cut out of the dark friend council, the dark friend hierarchy. I feel like Shiriam is like so low, even though it looks like she's powerful because she's advising the Amerlin seat.
Yeah.
But like everybody shits on Shiriam.
Yeah, totally. And Halima is forsaken, right? Like, so Shiriam has no idea. Delana, if Delana knows that Shiriam is Black Aja, Shiriam doesn't know that Delana is Black Aja. Like, the way that everything's organized, like, we've got dark friends fighting dark friends because chaos is good, right?
Evil will always turn on itself.
Yeah. Fascists are petty bitches. And so basically what we're learning from the fact that negotiations are being talked about, the core that's not misinformation here, is that it means that Ramonda and Lelaine are starting to lose their balance of power a little bit, and we're starting to actually have motion on an item that the two of them were just keeping completely locked up, because as the line is, they would oppose one another if it meant they both drowned. So, you know, the fact that they're having a conversation that actually is going somewhere means that, like, they're starting to work together / one of them's getting more power.
So, which they're going towards negotiation or going? That I wasn't sure about. Like, what are they slipping on? What are they agreeing on something for the first time? Are they? Is one of them winning? I wasn't sure what's shifting here.
I don't really know, but there's then immediately made mention of how much the eruption of the power has disturbed them and how they're still waiting for news from their little away team that went to go check out what happened. So maybe it's just everyone going to ground and being uncertain around the cleansing is just like, well, we're going to procrastinate on talking about stuff by deciding to negotiate. I don't know. I'm not really sure where this comes up from.
So, okay, the way I'm reading it, Delana says, you might inquire what they think on the subject of negotiations with Elida Mother. And then there's some thoughts. And why should I ask that? Because the subject has come up in the hall in the last few days, but it has been mentioned by, and then lists a whole bunch of people. And those people were divided between the two major factions struggling for control. So the fact that all 5 of those people have brought up negotiations, and yet some of them are on Ramonda's side and some of them on our Lelaine's side, means that Ramonda and Lelaine are both thinking and floating the idea of negotiations.
Which doesn't make any sense, given that one of them's a blue and the other one, her power comes from being a rebel. And
right.
It's very confusing.
And I think it's just because they are worried about the violence, maybe, in Tarvalin?
No, they're worried about the violence of the eruption, right?
Oh, okay.
And they're like, well, maybe we should make nice with Elida in case the Forsaken are, like, super scary, but, like...
Yeah, for half a week now, because it's been 5 days since the power, right?
Yep.
For half a week now, which is 5 out of 10, talk of Elida or retaking Tower had all been overwhelmed by worried conversation over that impossibly powerful, impossibly long eruption of the power. Yeah. So yesterday they sent a Karin Sedai to go. She's a Brown. She volunteered to go check it out.
Yeah.
We won't hear back from her until a couple of chapters from now when she shows back up and lets them know that actually there's just a big hole where Shadar Logoth used to be.
And that is today in world timeline, right? That still happens in this day.
I don't think so.
Okay. Not yet.
Let me look up Arkan. They show up in Crossroads of Twilight, chapter 19. I don't know how many days passes in her timeline.
Okay. I thought that they got back today, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's still today. It is in 3 chapters. Okay. So whether that's still today or whether a day passes, I'm not entirely sure. The whole group consists of Akarin, Therva, the yellow, not Therava, Therva, a yellow.
Okay.
Shauna, a white. Rico, a blue. Niacin, a gray. and an unidentified green. And we see the report in chapter 19. Niacin has an expertise in residuals. That's sort of, otherwise, there's not really a lot of references to these folks. Mm-hmm. But essentially, they were chosen because they're good at reading weaves after they've been woven.
But yeah, so they're kind of waiting on that news and willing to consider how to reunite the tower, even in a very unlikely way, because they're scared, basically. Shiriam is very upset at this proposal, because obviously.
Right, because she doesn't want the tower to reunite. She's the Black. She says none of them can really believe negotiation is possible. Anyana, Jesus Christ, help me with this. Anaya, thank you, agrees with them. Elida's basically saying you have to come crawling to us. That's the only way we'll ever let you back in, which the Blue can't do. And I mean, she's essentially disbanded the Blue, right? No one's ever gonna. Right.
They're assuming that she's gonna have non-starter opening options, which she does. She does. They are correct to assume that will be her demand.
And then there's a couple of paragraphs here where it's, they're talking about Mogla, and they're just referring to all of these Aes Sedai who are either on Romonda or Lelane's faction. And I didn't look into it too much to see if there's any personal politics or any dark friendery going on there.
Same. There's nothing that I see of interest. It's just, it's the fluff and nonsense that we have to cut through.
Romonda holds Seroya and Varlin. Mogla is on Lelane's side.
No, Mogla's a Romonda person. It doesn't fucking matter.
It doesn't matter.
Fucking name salad all over the place. And Delana is clearly happy with how upset everyone is. And then Bayanin comes up and says, well, why shouldn't negotiations be out of the question? And Bayanin's motivation is very, very different, because Bayanin was sent to join the rebels by Elida in an effort to talk them back in. Elida sent the most ambitious Grey she knew to go be with the rebels and to try to talk them back, to try to break their organization. Not as a dark friend, not as an agent of chaos, but just as an ambitious Grey. And so when she hears that negotiations are being offered not coming from her, she's like, this is an excellent opportunity for me to try to do the mission I was sent on by Elida.
And Bayanin indirectly is the one who gives traveling to the Seanchan, right? Because she betrays... Once Egwene gets captured, she betrays Egwene, returns to the tower, says, well, you're not the Emerald Seed anymore, so I am now loyal to Elida, and I get to teach Elida all these fancy weaves you've learned, including gateways.
The gateway is how she gets Elida to listen to her in the first place. She's like, gives her that.
Exactly.
At the very beginning, yeah.
And then Elida gets captured by the Seanchan, and Seanchan have gateways.
Oh, you're right. Oh, Bayanin, you ambitious bitch.
Right. So her betrayal is what gives not just Elida, but Elida and multiple Tower Aes Sedai gateways.
It's how it breaks containment in such a way that the Seanchan get access to it.
Yep.
It was inevitable, but that's how it happened.
That's how it happened. That's what breaks the containment of gateways in that Egwene so far is the only female Aes Sedai to figure out how to use, and she's taught other female Aes Sedai how to do it. But she's the one who invented female traveling, right? Other than Avienda's accidental gateway.
Right, the unreplicatable. And she's given it to the Aiel. The Aiel have it, and the Seafolk are going to have it.
Yep.
So the Seanchan... the Seanchan are going to get it, right?
Right.
They're going to get it. But yeah, Bayanin is how it gets to the White Tower. And that it presumably is how it ultimately does get to the Seanchan, because they don't capture anyone else who has that ability up until that point.
So yeah. And then Egwene eventually convinces Bayanin that she was wrong to betray her, and so gets Bayanin back under her wing as but that's getting into the whole politics of the ferrets and all that stuff with the... It
has mostly to do with Elida being a shithead and Bayanin deciding that she's tied herself to the wrong Amerlin, and Egwene being awesome, and then Bayanin's like, yeah, you're right, fuck it, I'm also a spy on the inside, I guess. It's really fun.
I'm a triple agent, I guess, now, fuck.
It's really funny when Egwene is scolding her, because Bayanin's like, I would actually like to see Elida come down after all this. And Egwene's like, but you were a rebel. What the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, she's ambitious, but she's ultimately a good person. When push comes to shove, Bannon's not like the worst arid hole kind of human. She's just ambitious and short-sighted.
And in a lot of ways, I think if Elaida hadn't proven to be an awful, awful Amyrlin, she would have been justified.
Totally. And she wouldn't have changed sides either, because she's not a coward. She's just calculating.
Right.
And really personally ambitious.
And so finally, Egwene says, okay, fine, go ahead and negotiate. You have my permission, right? But under the condition that Elaida will resign and go into exile. And she gives, basically, she's damaged the tower. She's exiled in Aja. There's no way to reconcile with her still in charge. And so you essentially have non-starters on both sides, right?
Yeah.
Elaida's non-starter.
Both sides are negotiating in bad faith.
Is that the blue will remain gone and I will remain in power. And you'll come crawling back to me. And Egwene saying, no, you'll resign and get the fuck out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's clear both sides are just playing for time in all of the negotiations. Like, there are one or two grays who believe that this is going to work, because there's always one or two people who believe the nation state leaders when they say that they want to talk. But, like, it's so obvious that no one actually means it.
Again, how ineffective the grays are. Their negotiations are used as a stalling tactic, not as an actual way to end wars and conflict.
Mm-hmm. And presumably that's why there have been so many wars, despite the secret histories telling the daring-do tales of grays from time immemorial. And Egwene thinks also here about how if Elaida wasn't such a shithead Amyrlin, she and Swan both agree that like they would be willing to submit to whatever conditions if it would reunite the tower, if Elaida wasn't categorically the worst.
Right.
They're like, if this was a competent Amyrlin, fuck our personal issues with her and how she got power. The point is the world. But literally, this woman cannot be left in charge for the sake of the world.
I love Bannon's reaction to faint. She's like, oh, shit.
Emotions don't make people faint, Jordan. Not like that. Ridiculous.
I'm going to disagree. I passed out the first time I got fired.
You've told me that, but that's like, I don't believe her here. People occasionally get so shocked that they lose blood flow, but Jordan has people getting surprised into fainting by difficult circumstances so often.
Sure.
And she's a gray being given a ridiculous opening salvo. That's like her bread and butter. This isn't a fainting offense. This isn't learning that the kin have existed for hundreds of years. This is, I don't know. If Jordan used fainting less often, I might buy this one. But it's
just bad news, right? She thought she had a solution, and it turns out she's given absolutely non-starter. She can't negotiate in good faith. Everything she thought she could do is been cut out from under her, and now she's essentially betrayed Elaida. Like she will, and she's incurred the wrath of Elaida.
Yeah, you're right. She did actually just go through a really intense whiplash in the course of like 4 sentences, from like the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. I guess that could cause a precipitous drop in blood pressure. Because she went from not having an option to having all the options to having none of the options and worse hazards. So, all right, I guess she's allowed to faint, but Jordan uses it too much.
I also love Bannon's like summary of the situation, because she's just really wrong. Right? Elaida would not have made the proclamation she did concerning the Dragon Reborn unless she had him in hand. She does not have him in hand.
Yeah, because she got that note from Tovane, or whoever it was, Galena, and she's like, aha, it's done. She did the quintessential popping the champagne like before.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah,
with the banner.
Yeah, the ring has been placed in the bull's nose. All we have to do is finish bringing him to market. And it's like, do might as well is between you and market, bitch.
And then the flare of Sidar must be a warning. The Forsaken must be moving. Like, again, attributing the cleansing to the Forsaken as opposed to Rand. Totally wrong.
Because Rand didn't send out a memo like he should have.
Yeah. I mean, apparently, Myrelle should be telling him that Lan was at the heart of this. And Egwene would be like, oh, Lan was there. Therefore, Rand was there. Therefore, we're good to go. Yeah,
if Lan's there, then Nynaeve's there. And if Nynaeve's there, then we know Rand is there. And if Lan's not dead, then Nynaeve's fine, which means Rand's fine. It's fine.
Right,
it's fine.
Right. And we know that, Nynaeve's probably the one who was doing that powering because she's super powerful. So it would make sense that she's the one channeling that energy, right? Like, all that comes together if Myrelle was just not, hiding it, or it could just, maybe it was an overlook. Jordan overlooked it, or she just he's probably justifying it by saying Myrelle just doesn't want to talk about Lan, and so isn't even bringing him up and isn't even thinking about him. She may have even fuzzed him out. Who knows? Right.
And yet again, we come to the meme of the Wheel of Time. The Wheel of Time if people talked to each other.
Much shorter. much shorter. Then
we wouldn't have a 2-hour recording for this chapter. Yeah, so that's all I've got. I've just got a little bit of a readout.
Read us out.
Okay. It's time to get back to camp, Egwene said, calmly. What had to be done had to be done. Perhaps surrender would have healed the tower, but she could not believe it. And now it might come down to Aes Sedai facing one another in the streets of Tarvalon, unless she could find a way to make her plan succeed. We have work to do, she said, gathering her reins, and there isn't much time left. She prayed there was enough. Yeah, so there we have it. Egwene on the riverbank, plotting.
And yeah, we've got a chunk of Egwene. We're going to hang out with Egwene for the next couple of chapters while we finish up the cleansing, and then it's on to what I think of as part 2 of Crossroads of Twilight, which is surprisingly I mean, we got some Perrin stuff, which I know everybody gets, but it's Perrin, Mat, and Rand, right? We've got the big 3, been hanging out with everybody else for the entire first part of the book, and then we get some Perrin, Mat, and Rand at the end of this book. So I'm excited for that. I think it's going to be, I hope it's going to be better than the first half in my memory, right? I think the second half is faster and more interesting. The first half is so frustrating because you are just rehashing the cleansing.
Yeah, but we're getting very near the end of that. We've only got a few more of these little doubleheader things going. And yeah, as you said, we'll be into second half of Crossroads, which is the shorter half for sure.
Right.
And that will be nice.
And technically, we are past the cleansing in this book, right? From here on out, we are post-cleansing. The Egwene chapters are them talking about the cleansing.
As we wrap up actually watching it happen. It's great. It's totally neat.
So I'm really looking forward to the post-cleansing stuff, and we're going to need some new artwork for our podcast.
Oh, yeah, because we're moving on past the thing.
Past the big bubble that we've got. So I think we're Knife of Dreams.
I'm content with keeping it. Okay. It's fine. But if we get another one, it's fine too. Like, whatever.
Yeah, it was just a thought that it would be nice to have a final battle type. Like, because we did Ruidian for the first 4 books. We've done
the cleansing,
or the first 5 books. We've done the cleansing for the next 5-ish books. And then the last 4 should probably be a last battle themed art.
You're right. You're right. I hate change, but you're right.
Well, throw this in the podcast and see what people say. Write into us if you think we should change it or keep it the same. Like, if you want your artwork to look the same, I'm fine with that. That's easy for us. If you want us to change it up, I honestly don't know if I can get the original artist who did the first 2 to do another one. She has a life and we haven't talked in a while, and it's a lot of effort on her part. So I can reach out again and see if she wants to do something, or I can, go with a different artist, or we can leave it the way it is. Those are our options, I suppose.
Let us know how much you hate change.
I can either change it or leave it the way it is. That's kind of, I guess, the only 2 things you can ever really do, right? An object in motion stays in motion.
Indeed.
Unless acted upon by an outside force.
And if you want different podcast art in your feed, remember to check out Hot Nuance. Our logo is very, very purple. It's a book on fire because it's Hot Nuance. And you should listen to us every Monday in your podcast feed. Different art entirely.
Totally different art. And if you want something entirely different, I'll shout out the fact my girlfriend has started a podcast with her sisters. It's called That Bitch Is Always Late. It is absolutely nothing like this podcast. It is much different, but we are editing it and putting it out. And I do think she's hilarious. That's why I'm dating her. I think she's even funnier with her sisters. So if you want something that is intelligent and fun and quality, go listen to Aradia's podcast. If you want to listen to some gossip, go listen to my girl's podcast, which is That Bitch Is Always Late. It's
very fun, even if I don't understand a lot of the references being made, because it's very pop culture-y stuff, and I'm just like, I'm going to edit the word shapes. I don't know what's being said. But it's funny. I laugh.
Yeah, no, I laugh all the time. It's a very different humor.
Lots of podcasts coming out from Fox and Raven Media.
Fox and Raven Media. We need to make a website.
Yes.
I've owned the domain for ages, but we need to make a website.
Yeah, I need to take the time to get my warder to walk me through the Tell-I-Ran-Riad interface, because he knows how to make these things work. I just don't. So I need to be brought up to speed. But keep an eye out. Fox and Raven Media is making podcasts, and it's going to have a website eventually.
And yeah, we're just trying to keep those separate. Not to keep them separate, but the podcast is this Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast is an entity, and then Fox and Raven Media is the business. That it's the LLC I created to, manage the finances, Patreon and all that kind of stuff. And, but that's also sort of become the media company where we did Watt Spoilers, we did, Just Roll With It. We did, Mistborn Spoilers, Broken Earth Spoilers. Now we're doing That Bitch Is Always Late and Hot Nuance. So, yeah, we just keep making more podcasts, and we edit Tarball and After Dark as a business.
Tarball and After Dark, yeah. It is a Fox and Raven Media production in the intellectual property sense. I did it as a podcast producer for us, but it is not our content.
It's not our content, right? Which is something we're trying to get into more, right? So I guess this is our other shout out, right? If you have a podcast idea and you want to pay us to edit it, reach out. Right? We are looking to grow. It doesn't have to deal with books. It doesn't have to deal with Wheel of Time. We are podcast producers at this point, and Aradia has nothing but time.
Rapidly running out of it as his projects pile up.
Yes, but yeah. We are looking to expand, and I can take some of the burden if it gets too much, but for the most part, it is Aradia doing it right now.
Yeah, and my job is to help you get out of your own way. You're trying to say something, and the actual mechanical act of saying it is difficult, and getting your thoughts out is difficult, but an editor can help that, and that's my goal. If you have shit to say, I will help you say it. I don't really want to hear more of my own voice. I don't know why I started another podcast where I'm talking. I'm so tired of hearing myself talk. But yeah, if you want to talk without me, please hit me up.
Please. Please. All right. Well, I think with that, I am done.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And remember to follow us on Patreon and shit, where you can get ad-free episodes.
And hopefully, I think we're going to do thanking our latest Patreons on next week's episode.
Oh, which is also a double header. We're doing 2 chapters next week. So Patreons and 2 chapters.
Yay. And we got Morgan coming back for a guest. Not next week, but...
No, we have a new guest, another guest coming next. Not next week, but next.
The week after.
There's 1 or 2 more Morgans in this book.
It looks like 2. Actually, It looks like 3.
I gave Morgan everything she wanted.
Yeah, she said 21, 22, and 27. Okay,
so we got 3 more Morgans this book. Excellent. Which I think this book is going to take us up through the holiday season. Looking at our calendar.
9/26 is when we are doing the last one. Do we
really?
That can't be right.
That's no way that's right. I thought it... Oh, no, I'm thinking my other schedule. That's the one that goes through November.
No, this is...
Yeah, all right. So through September. So for the rest of the summer, we're going to be on this book for the rest of the summer. And then when fall rolls around, so will Knife of Dreams.
So, yeah,
happy solstice, everyone, by the way.
Oh, yeah, happy solstice. Yeah, we've got 12 episodes left, which is, at 4 a month, that's 3 months. So
All right.
Yeah, we're about 6 months a book, right? Because we started this 228 and we're ending it at like 928. So that's about 7 months.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Though I do find TC Traveler's comment about the ads is hilarious. She said, I let the ads play because it gives me Aussie ads and I find the accent shift hilarious. Yeah. It's really, we're just yelling into the void and we shouldn't care any of the numbers. So.
The numbers are so all over the place. It's one of those things where sometimes people binge, sometimes people stop, people come, people go. Half of it's probably robots anyway. You know, like I just, when people are like, just listen to however you feel like it. Some people listen on YouTube. Some people listen on the in apps.
Yeah. And we've made the feed available to all of our patrons. So.
Right. Yep. So if you give even $1 at this point, you can go to Patreon and, listen without the ads.
Yeah, but then we don't get download stats because I haven't. There is a thing, I think, where we would end up getting like downloads and stuff, but I just stare at it and then I blink and then I go somewhere else.
The downloads, I mean, they don't really count towards the ad revenue, so it's less important to count them.
Well, I just want to see them because number go up, make brain go burr. But also then when number go down, brain go.
That's why I stopped paying attention to the numbers, because when number go down, brain go, and that was not worth the brain go when the numbers go up.
Yeah, it's a conundrum that I will be talking with people on the content creator panel that I'm having a meeting for after this. That's one of the things we're actively going to be talking about on that panel at WatCon is
brain space.
How to deal with the emotional ups and downs of being a content creator. Like, because I'm nowhere I'm talking with Lauren. He's going to
drugs.
And Lauren has a lot to say about following the numbers because he does YouTube stuff, and there's so many more numbers if you do YouTube stuff.
Oh my god, yeah, that's I can only imagine doing YouTube because the numbers, like the podcast thing, you sort of hit a weekly subscriber base and you stick with it. You don't have a lot of people who find you organically. Most people, once they subscribe, don't unsubscribe, right? We have a very stable base. YouTube is a different barrel of fish altogether. Even
the channels I love, I'll binge their stuff for a while and then I won't watch it again for a year. Like I am not a good, predictable watcher on YouTube. I am all over the place.
Yeah, and long form content is much harder on YouTube, both because it's harder to produce video that's interesting and the file sizes get absolutely ridiculous. And then also because YouTube just doesn't promote it. They don't like it. They don't want it.
And yeah. Yeah. I'm actually going to read this in now.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?